In my opinion, this is the greatest collection of modern British art to come on the market, certainly in my 30 years in the art world, and arguably, I think, ever. I've never seen such an extraordinary collection, so complete, with such wonderful masterpieces.
A lot of the paintings in this collection and the sculptures and the objects just haven't been seen by the public for well nigh 50 years.
I had no idea it had so many Stanley Spencers. I didn't know it had these two remarkable Lucian Freud drawings. I didn't know it had Henry Moore. I didn't know it had this wonderful Patrick Heron from 1954 hanging behind me. They were collected by a remarkable man called Wilfred Evill, and he put together this extraordinary collection.
There's very little publicly known about Evill. His character is actually quite elusive. During the research for this collection, we've unearthed only one photograph. It's been interesting to start to piece things together. Born in 1891, he's a solicitor. He lived and worked in London all his life and builds up his legal practice during the 1920s. But what really starts to come to the fore is the dedication that he applies both to his professional life but also to his collecting. Someone who really knew what they were buying, really got under the surface of their subject. Honor's relationship with Wilfred is quite interesting, and it almost has that kind of Victorian novel feel about it. He knew her parents well. They die when she's quite young, and he takes over really her upbringing as her guardian. They are clearly very close, and of course when Wilfred dies, his collection and estate pass to Honor. It's not just in a custodian role. There's a very definite sense of understanding what Wilfred had done and maintaining that. Wilfred had small exhibitions periodically at home and in his offices, which were done for the members of the Contemporary Art Society, and produced small catalogues. In one of these we have what I suppose is the closest we get to a statement from Evill about his collecting. From the outset it was determined to keep the collection strictly contemporary and strictly British, largely recruited from those painters who were making their way, to the partial exclusion of those who had come to fame in 1927.
There are some examples in his collection of artists who were very, very well known at the time, like Walter Sickert, William Nicholson, artists whose careers had really peaked. But there are many artists like Edward Burrough, William Roberts, Stanley Spencer, who were certainly well known and were successful, but there's a real sense of Evill appreciating these artists' work and feeling that they deserved his support. And he's often buying paintings that perhaps contemporary viewers would have found more challenging.
You're seeing a generational shift in the way in which he's buying. Wilfred's taste was pretty avant-garde. One thing that's been very, very interesting within all the documentary side of the collection is Wilfred's stockbook, which has been invaluable. For some of these artists, he's buying them really quite early in their career. For instance, I mean, we see that he buys his Lucian Freud Boy on a Sofa in 1945. He pays 18 guineas.
Freud had his first one-man show in London in November 1944. And really excitingly, Boy on a Sofa was included in the exhibition. Evill must have bought it on the opening night because it entered his collection only a month later. Boy on a Sofa hasn't been seen in public since the Hayward show of Freud's work in 1974, so seeing it again today is really incredibly exciting.
Other pieces that he's buying by sort of bigger name artists, he was buying them at strong prices.
He has two Henry Moores within his collection. In the late 40s and early 50s, when he bought the Moores, Henry Moore was really, really very well known. The two Moores that he did choose are absolutely fantastic examples of their type.
We also find Wilfred hunting things down.
Sunflower and Dog Worship was sold within 2 hours of its exhibition to Sir Hugh Walpole. Evill was such a dedicated collector of Spencer's work that for the next 8 years he had to wait.
He has to wait until 1945 when Walpole sells it through an exhibition at the Leicester Galleries. So it was clearly a picture that he'd had his eye on and had to wait until he could acquire that. I suppose there's an underlying taste in Wilfred's collection, which is very much towards the narrative. It's very, very little abstraction.
Many of the artists in the collection I would describe as visionary. Artists who can give the viewer a snapshot of what their world is like, and we can just step over that threshold into the artist's mind. What's great about this painting by Edward Burrough is I think it really conveys Wilfred Evill's love of detail. So you look in the background, you look in the bust, and you see all these details that at first don't display themselves. But as time goes on, it's a sort of building love of the objects in front of the collector. And I think that's something that's true for Evill when it comes to furniture, paintings, works on paper, and the ceramics.
Looking at the receipts of the furniture that he bought, he seems to have had a small period in the mid-50s where he really chased some of these great pieces. This was a focused attempt to build a collection of great Regency furniture in a very short period of time. Whether he knew the importance of some of these things when he bought them will always be a question, but my feeling is he just had an eye for beauty and of real quality. As with many of the great collectors, Wilfred wanted to mark the things that were in his collection, and in the 50s he commissioned a small stamp to be put on pieces of porcelain with the WE initials, a mark of his approval and something that will stand the test of time.
There is a sense that he's really very much involved in not just the objects themselves, but also the people who created them, and his friendships and knowledge of those artists is very clear and comes out in a lot of the reminiscences that we've been able to turn up.
One of the artists who Evill became particularly friendly with was Graham Sutherland. Not only as a friend, but also he acted for him. And in the collection there's an extraordinary range of Sutherland's work, from really lovely little sketches, personally dedicated for Wilfred, to the most exceptional crucifixion from 1947. When Evill died, Sutherland wrote to honour, "We both miss him a great deal, and more as time goes on. Curiously, without his friendship and advice, I sometimes feel lost."
It's a wonderful story, backed up with one of the greatest collections, certainly British collections, to have ever come on the market. It doesn't happen all that often either.